David, I need you to stand by, and I'm glad you mentioned the Washington Post because one of the three reporters who wrote the story that broke earlier this evening on the Washington Post is Adam Intus, and he joins me now by phone. So, Adam, you heard David Axelrod mentioning the story, warning from the acting Attorney General that Michael Flynn could be vulnerable to Russian blackmail. Did you expect such a quick reaction from General Flynn and from the White House?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, no, absolutely not. I do agree completely with David that, this is, not going to go away. It just, we have additional questions here that have not been addressed, such as, who might have known about Flynn's communications with Kislyak that were misdescribed, mischaracterized, to Pence and some others in the White House. And those are questions that I think, Senate investigators are definitely going to be looking at closely. Having Flynn outside the White House now that he's resigned raises questions also about, what is the status of that FBI investigation, which was looking into these communications? Is that investigation continuing? And these are all things that obviously we don't know the answers to at this point, but hopefully in the coming days we'll get some clarity on.
I found your report fascinating. I had to read it several times. The amount of information in it is just staggering. But I want you to tell me specifically about the blackmail concerns. You report that the AG, Sally Yates, felt Flynn was vulnerable to Russian blackmail because he misled senior administration officials. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, what you got to understand here is that basically Kislyak speaks to Flynn. The FBI is listening to Kislyak. They get Flynn. It's called incidental collection. When Flynn finishes that phone call with Kislyak, Kislyak writes a cable, makes a phone call, whatever, basically tells Moscow what he just spoke to Flynn about. The NSA picks that up too, or the FBI picks that up too. And so Moscow knows that Flynn and Kislyak spoke about the sanctions. And yet, in the CBS interview, Pence says he spoke to Flynn, and there was he had received assurances from Flynn that there was no discussion of the sanctions. The idea here is, and what Sally Yates was thinking, along with, by the way, James Clapper, who at the time was the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, John Brennan, who was the CIA director, was that the Russians at some point had this information on Flynn, or at least they thought they did, that they could use as leverage. And by telling the White House counsel, Sally Yates thought, and so did Clapper and so did Brennan, that you would take away that leverage that the Russians would have, that they might try at one point down the road to try to exercise. And so that's really what this was. In addition to, obviously, Sally Yates and, again, these other officials feeling like there had been a mischaracterization of a discussion, and Pence not knowing the truth was something that would, in the end, he would probably hold against the intelligence community for not sharing with him.
It's just fascinating. And all of this came about because of Vladimir Putin's, at least the record of the phone call, is because of how Vladimir Putin reacted to the sanctions that the Obama administration placed on them. It was an irregular reaction, and so members of, I would imagine, the intelligence community or investigative unit, the FBI and so on, went back to look for a record of any phone calls with this particular ambassador, this Russian ambassador, and came across this. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, well, I mean, any time basically Putin makes a decision, especially one that was unexpected, analysts in the intelligence community are basically trying to figure out what happened. They pull on all kinds of intelligence, signals intelligence, intercepted communications, reports from diplomats around the world, and spies that might also provide tips. When it comes to intercepted communications or signals intelligence, the FBI does the wiretaps on ambassadors in the United States. The NSA is listening overseas. And so that's where they go. I mean, a good portion of our intelligence, about anywhere between 65%, 75%, comes from so-called signals intelligence, which would be like like what we're talking about here, which is the wiretap.
And that's
so
where
there's what we call a FISA warrant, which is constantly being renewed on Kislyak's phone, and he knows this. And Flynn knows this too, or at least he should know it, that Kislyak's being monitored. The target here is Kislyak, and by accident, basically, they get Flynn in that conversation.
Interesting. Adam Intus, The Washington Post. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
When we come right back, much more on our breaking news. National Security Advisor Michael Flynn resigns in the wake of the Justice Department's warning to the White House last month on his contacts with Russia, with the Russian ambassador. We'll be right back.